Okay, we're on.
Let's get everyone standing in the back, please come up front. We're ready for Havdalah.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone to the Malach of the Carlebach Hasidim of Brooklyn. I hope that we have a wonderful program in store for you tonight. We had a very special Shabbos with our guest Chazan, Heshi Brody, who will now lead us in Havdalah and a few other songs. Perfect. Take it away.
La What he was at. We didn't talk about that. But yeah, the last week. Some of you might not have heard it, so I'll tell it again. Those who heard it, it's always a good story to hear. Thank you. I'm going to ask everybody who has to talk, at least talk in the back, because it's very distracting up here. About 5 years ago, right after Shlomo passed away, the Pope Lahavdil came to America. And he was going to have a big gathering in the Meadowlands for 80,000 Catholics and the Pope. And one of the people who had to be there was somebody who works for Mayor Giuliani and down into the Carlebach show. And so he had to be there for security or whatever it is to make sure everything went right. And he walks into the Meadowlands and there are 80,000 Catholics and the Pope. And over the loudspeaker he hears music playing. Da, 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 and he's totally amazed. And here he is, the Pope and 80,000 Catholics, and they're playing Lamana Chayvarei. After the concert is over, he's traveling back to New York City for the Meadowlands, and he's in one of the limousines with one of the cardinals. And he says, I have to ask you this question, he says. Here you have 80,000 Catholics and the Pope, and you're playing this song that my rabbi wrote. And the cardinal says, who's your rabbi wrote? Shlomo Carlebach? He says, yeah. He says, we play his music in the Vatican all the time. And it seems, he says, the Pope doesn't understand it, but somehow his music reaches the people spiritually. So they actually took some of his songs and they put their own words to it. About 2 years ago, when they observed the art set in the Carlebach Shul, they showed a video from Poland. And Shlomo Carlebach was very popular in Poland, not only among Jews, but even non-Jews. That's another story I won't get into now. But they had a memorial of Shlomo Carlebach, believe it or not. And there was the Pope sitting there, and there was all the big leaders of Poland sitting there. And we have this in the video in the shul, and we hear them singing Lamana Chai in Polish. I don't know what words they were using, but there's no question it was Lamana Chai. So, with that note, I'd like to sing Lamana Chai, and I want everybody to join. We'll sing it in Hebrew. Maybe English also.
One, two. Okay.
3, 4.
Turn it on. Is it on?
Oh, turn it on.
It is on. 3, 4.
it's on the record with by the wall that he made by the wall, and it was a 2-volume record. Somehow it got lost, I think. I haven't really heard too many people sing it. It's called Hu Yashmienu. And it's a beautiful song. And can't do it like Shlomo did it, but I'll do it as best I can. Hu Yashmienu.
again. Heshi, we can't thank you enough for being with us. You are the greatest. And I don't mean just vocally, you are the greatest. And Heshi's mom, we're so happy that you came tonight also. Mrs. Brody's in the audience with us. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Well, Rabbi Shimon Jacobsen is here with us. He'll be coming up shortly. And our big headliner for tonight, Rabbi Shimon Kugel. So stick around. Up next, our great friend, David Kerner, with his wonderful international hit on Jonathan Pollard. Come on up, David.
Hello, testing 1, 2.
Testing 1, 2.
Thanks very much for Bianco. We're going to do a couple of songs for you. Testing 1, 2. The first song I'm going to do is called Hamavdil, so we figured we'd play it tonight. The chorus is from Yitzchak HaKatan from several centuries ago. The words are relatively new. One second. Honorable Mention is the name of the group. The sinking sun has disappeared. It's faded from the sky. Now the time has come to bid the Shabbos Queen goodbye. With the train of 1,000 angels dancing, basking in her light, we'll walk her down to the edge of town, and there we'll say goodnight. We'll wait for you so patiently, counting down the days, till we greet you with the Chaldoti and candles all ablaze. At a table set for our holy guests, we'll take you to our hearts, and it's there you'll stay through the coming days, even though we'll be apart. Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chol, Hatoseinu goyim l'chol, Tareinu levaspeinu, Yar be'kol. Now in your darkest night, if you think you might not make it till the dawn, just remember the holy Shabbos Queen and the sweetness of her song, and hold your braided candle high, and need no place for fear, 'cause the God of all of Israel is one and always near. As our flames unite, I can see the light that was here to save the way. For the time to come when The city calls us, yes you know. The prophets, they all say to go, but the world just tells us no. To whom will you listen? Where will you get from there? All was created, the angels hosts and worlds on high, all interwaited. The sun, the moon, the stars above gave light and waited. Now mankind, she's calling home. The prophets stayed. City of gold, city of stone, Jerusalem calling us home.
Thank you. As you can tell, it's still in its experimental stages.
Okay, we were asked to play 3 songs, so we're going to finish up with the song about someone who's been in jail for 14 years. His name's Jonathan Pollard, and there's a lot you could say, but all we'll say is that nobody else has gotten a 14-year sentence, which is actually a life sentence, for a similar crime. I think you all know that. We're preaching to the converted. But this song is an audience participation song, which means, not that we want you to sing along, but please sing along, is that everyone needs to do their part. That's what the song is talking about, doing our part. We can all call the president. We live in the greatest democracy in the world. We can call up the president at a phone number that I'll give you in a second. And tell him 202. It starts with 202. Thank you. And we should all do our part because, really, we can call up Hillary now. Hillary is getting involved in this also. And tell her what you think. Basically,
You don't have to vote for her, but you can still call her up.
right. Basically, people who spy, convicted of spying for enemy countries, have gotten off in 2 to 4 years. And here's a man serving a life sentence. So it's called Justice Denied. 202-456-1111. It's very easy. 456-1111. And really, you should call and... I'd like to thank Rabbi for asking us to play. And this is called Justice Denied.
Pollard sits in the cell. What standing on the rooftops and shouting, justice, justice, you shall pursue. But their sneers leave the holy cold. Never even had a trial, now he's deep in exile. Shackled, silenced alone. Jonathan, I'm your trial so close to your heart. Jonathan, you can be free. We all do our part. We as us in this room.
Now it gives me great pleasure. I'm going to let the band take a little break. No Malava Malka would be a Malava Malka if we didn't hear some words of Torah. It gives me great pleasure to bring up our next guest. His name is Rabbi Shimon Jacobsen. Among one of the milestones in his life is his book, Towards a Meaningful Life, has become a worldwide bestseller. We consider it a real honor to have him with us tonight. Please welcome Rabbi Shimon Jacobsen.
Everyone. I don't feel like I'm a guest, frankly. I feel like at home with Rabbi Yankel always, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you. You read this week's Parshas in the Torah. You read about the birth of our nation and the prices that were paid by Avram Avinu and Sarah. And there was one thing that struck me that really, moved me very deeply, and let me share it with you. You read about Avram Avinu being promised in last week's Parsha, last week's reading, that one day he will have a nation that will be spread all over the world, like the stars that cover the heavens. And put yourself for a moment, personalize it. Put yourself for a moment in his shoes. Avram didn't even have a child at that point. Yitzchak wasn't even born yet. His wife Sarah was unable to have a child. So Avram was promised by Hashem, by God, not only will you have a child, you'll have a nation that will be all over the earth. So I'm sure Avram Avinu didn't have any doubt. He was a man of faith. But if you put yourself in his shoes, you have to think for a moment, the odds. He doesn't even have one child yet. Now, if you turn the clock forward 4,000 years, approximately, so if Avram Avinu was sitting with us in this room tonight, what's literally mind-blowing is the nachas and the pleasure you would have. God fulfilled his promise. And all of us here, all of you, every Jew and every group and every Malava Malka, Shabbos, wherever they may be, is a real fulfillment of a promise made 4,000 years ago. And sometimes you have to pause and appreciate these things because, we go through life and it has its vicissitudes, its ups and downs. And it just moves me because just walking into the room here, it doesn't really matter what Jews and what type of Jews and what backgrounds and what educations. Just the mere fact that we exist is a fulfillment of that promise. And I don't know if the word pleasure is even adequate, but the power of Avram Avinu sitting here with us and seeing before his eyes the fulfillment that God fulfilled it and is documented. This isn't fantasy, it's documented in the Torah, is I think enough to empower any person. Now, Rabbi Yankel asked me, what am I going to speak about? So the truth is, I never really know what I'm going to speak about. I'll be honest with you. I believe in the axiom that speaking is listening. What I mean by that is that you have to, what right do I have here standing up here and you should listen to me? Why don't you stand here and I listen to you? Your souls and the neshamas that God put on this earth, just like myself. So one person speaks a little better than the other. That's technicalities. When Moshe Rabbeinu was when Hashem chose Moshe, he says, I want you to be the spokesman. You go to Mitzrayim, to Egypt, to Paray, And you tell him, let my people go, and they shall serve me. So what did Moshe say? Moshe said, he had every excuse, he didn't want to do it. One of the things he said, I'm not a speaker. Lo ish dvarim anechi. I'm not a man of words. Aral sfasayim, kvad peh, kvad loshen. Different expressions. Basically, Moshe had a speech impediment. And God did not relent. And Hashem said to him the immortal words. He said to him, Misam pela adam, who then gives a man a mouth to speak? It's me. So this man of no words ends up being, perhaps in all of history, the greatest orator of all. We know every word that Moshe uttered 3,000 years ago. And there's a whole sefer in Chumash, Dvarim, which is called the words of Moshe Rabbeinu. Ela hadvarim asher dibra Moshe. The man of Leish Dvarim, we know his words. Because words are not about oratory skills and about vocabulary and about eloquence. It's about the soul, communication. Words from the heart, the Rabbeinu Tam writes, words from the heart enter the heart. And words that come out of your mouth or from your mind enter one ear and come out the other. So I believe that speaking is listening, and which means that we're here together, and some people open their mouths, some people keep them closed, but we're all listening to each other. Without that, I don't have the right to speak to you, and frankly, you don't have the right to speak to others if you're not listening. Listening is the key, not to speak. If you listen, you know how to speak. So I was thinking, so what topic? So something came to me, I don't know. This is what came to me. Religion versus God. Okay. Now why that came to me is, I'll tell you why. I've been traveling a lot lately. After my book was published, I've been in close to 150 cities. All over the world, but primarily in the United States. And an interesting part of it is, I don't speak in shuls and in JCCs. I speak mostly in bookstores, in Barnes and Nobles, and borders across the country. What's so significant about that? Because there are Jews that will not walk into a room like this, and will not walk into a shul, but they will go into a bookstore, either to buy an auto repair manual or a cookbook, but they come there. So the interaction of meeting individuals, a person like myself from a background like my own, traditional, they say, and Jews of no background, is a pretty fascinating chemistry. And it's opened my eyes in many ways. I grew up in a frum home. But most of my involvement, frankly, is not with what we call frum Jews, particularly after my book was published. And what it's done for me is literally taught me something that I did not know, but not just taught me, transformed me. And I want to share with you some things in the context of a few stories. I was invited once to speak on a panel. It was a panel with two other rabbis, an Orthodox rabbi and a conservative rabbi, and myself, a layman. You'll see why I don't like to call myself Orthodox rabbi from this story. And I don't remember if I told the story here, did I? Yeah? Even if, people usually don't remember. Okay.
Tell it again.
What do you mean again? I thought I didn't tell it. Let me listen to the story. It's a powerful story, at least in my life. And it was a panel discussion about Mashiach and Geula, redemption, and fundamentals of Jewish faith. And a moderator presented several questions to each of us. And afterwards, the audience was invited to ask questions. And a woman in the back of the audience was like a room, an auditorium, maybe 400 or 500 people. And this was in Huntington, New York, in Torah Law School, auditorium there. And the woman got up and said, I'd like to ask you all rabbis this question. I speak for the largest segment of the Jewish population today, and that is the unaffiliated. She said 80% of the Jews, it doesn't matter what the number is, but it's definitely up there. The unaffiliated, that either don't believe in God, or question it, but basically are alienated and disillusioned with religious establishment. And I'd like to know, you all three eloquently presented the belief of Jews in the Messiah and that the world is going to be in a better place. My question is this: what will happen to us unaffiliated Jews if Mashiach comes tonight? That was her question. Before I respond what happened, why don't you think on your own what you would answer? So, the Orthodox rabbi spoke first, and he said, what will happen? He said these 4 words. He said, God will have mercy. And the whole auditorium booed him very loudly, and I felt very bad for him, because obviously this wasn't exactly a reverent crowd that were going to take an answer like that. And they either saw it as condescending or just plain, I don't know what it was, but they booed him. It was a loud boo. Now, then came the conservative rabbi, and he spoke, and he said, he turned to me, we were sitting on a podium, and he turned to me and he said to me, yeah, I have the same question myself for Rabbi Jacobsen. What will happen to them? So I don't know whether...
Got scared.
Well, that's what happened. But then he added something that really poured oil on the fire. He said, well, I once heard, and I'm not going to say the name of who he mentioned, who he said, I once heard the name of one of the tzaddikim, and his voice was dripping with cynicism as he said this. One of the tzaddikim in the past generation had said that the Holocaust happened because Jews were non-observant. And God was angry, and God's wrath resulted in the Holocaust. And then he went into every specific atrocity that the Nazis perpetrated on the Jews and described how midah keneged midah, tit for tat, God repaid them. Women didn't cover their hair. I don't want to get into the gory details, but it was quite, what can I say, quite difficult to hear. It's went to every little thing that happened to the Jews, the children and the adults and the men and the women, and each one was for another sin. That's what this rabbi said. And then he concluded and said, so I ask you this question: is this going to happen to the Jewish people that are non-observant today if Mashiach comes tonight? Because it's the same for the same reason. Now you know there are moments and there are moments. There are moments of truth, but you can't get away with a cute answer here. This was not, this was real. And I was sitting there under these lights that really got real hot under the collar, and I was thinking, what would the Moshe Rabbeinu answer to this question, and what would the true Oivei Yisrael, the lovers of Jews in the generations, what would they answer to this question? I knew that it was definitely not the first 2 answers. And you pray to God that God should put the right words in your mouth. And this is what I said. I said that Baal Tanya Shneur Zalman once said that when you're asked a question and you don't have an answer, tell a story. And if that doesn't work, you sing a song. So I said, I'll tell a story and I hope it helps. If it doesn't, I'll have to sing. Okay. And I told the following story. I said there was once a Rebbe who was very close to a fellow, a Jewish fellow, who was non-observant, but they spent a lot of time, quality time with each other. One of the Chassidim could not tolerate it. And he once came to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe, you always encourage us to ask questions. I don't understand why you spend so much, a disproportionate amount of time with this fellow when you have so many Chassidim that would give their lives just to spend a few minutes with you. And the Rebbe knew that this Chassid was a big diamond merchant, so he asked him to bring several diamonds of different values, and he put them out on the table. And he put them out on the table. The Rebbe said, I'm going to choose the most precious one of the lot. He chose a diamond, the largest one. And the Chassid asked the Chassid, so is this the most valuable stone here? The Chassid didn't want to contradict the Rebbe, but finally the Rebbe insisted, so he said, no, it's not. But it looks so beautiful and lustrous. The Rebbe said, and the Chassid said, well, with all due respect, Rebbe, you need to have a trained eye. That's not what it looks like. there's a cut and there's a carrot and there's a color, right? So the Rebbe smiled and said to him, well, with all due respect, how much more so with neshamas, with souls? You need to have a trained eye. Now, then I continued and said like this, look, it's Hashem and God that chooses to put a soul into the body, into the family that it's born into. We don't choose that. Why did God choose that some children should be born into healthy families and others into unhealthy, dysfunctional families, abusive ones? And why did God choose to put some children into very observant and intense and that get a very intense, serious Jewish education and others into completely assimilated homes, intermarried homes? We have no idea why. Now today, assimilation is more of a default state than a chosen one. Because it's a reality, people are born into different families and that's create opportunities or the lack of opportunity. We don't understand these mysterious ways. So how are we to judge and know what challenges and what neshamas are like? The neshamas come from God, we don't have no idea their levels. Then I added one final thing. I said, I once read in a sefer, in a holy book, that Moshe Rabbeinu was the humblest man that ever walked on earth, the Torah says. Moshe Anav, Kol Ad Moshe Pnei Kol Adam. And the question is asked, what was he so humble for? So this is what a big tzaddik writes. That Moshe was shown all the generations to come till the end of time. Hashem wanted to show him, to see what would come of the Jews. And when Moshe saw the last generation of Golos in exile, that was what humbled him. You know why? Because he said to himself, my generation is a third day, it's an enlightened generation. They see miracles, they witness miracles, experience revelation. And still they're not so perfect. But a generation like that has every reason not to believe in God, gone through a Holocaust and persecutions, we live in a scientific age, we have every reason, comfort, prosperity, we don't have to fight for our beliefs. And still there's a Jew trying to go to Shul on Rosh Hashanah, this one trying to put on tefillin, this one lighting a Shabbos candle. That humbled him. That's what humbled him. Because he saw like the emes. So I concluded and I said, if I can't answer all the questions, but if Mashiach comes tonight, this is what I was taught. That the Jews with the greatest challenges will march first. And that by tomorrow morning, every Jew on this earth, and every human being on this earth will know that Torah and mitzvahs is the most powerful and best way to actualize as a Jew, as a human being, fulfilling our mission in this world. Now, there was a very strong emotional reaction in the audience. I tell the story not to toot my own horn, but for a very particular reason, as you'll see in a moment. And the woman came over, and other people came over. I felt bad for the other rabbis, frankly. I'll tell you why. Because the reason they couldn't answer this was not because they weren't smart. They weren't taught this. I was taught this. It's not my own innovation. You see, Avos Yisrael is easy to talk about, but I want to know who does it. The biggest mitzvah, Hillel says the whole Torah is based on it. But people say, Hillel said that Kol HaTorah Kula is don't do unto others that you don't want done to yourself. Why is it so many Jews who are Torah Jews do unto others that they don't want done to themselves? Where's the Torah there? It's the entire Torah. Everything else is commentary, right? And what about the other way around? There's so many Jews that don't have Torah and they're very loving and kind. This is a question that's asked. This isn't a theoretical question. Another question. Hillel says is the whole Torah. What about Ben Adam L'Mokim? It makes sense. That's the part of Torah, Ben Adam L'Chaveri. Charity, Achnos L'Sorchim, guests. All the mitzvahs that have to deal with human to human fit into that which you dislike, don't do unto others. But what about all the mitzvahs, all the commandments, all the laws that are between God and man and God? Shabbos, kosher, the davening, karbonis in the time of the temple. Hundreds of mitzvahs that are not connected to morality or humane interrelationships. How could Hillel say this is the whole Torah and everything else is commentary? You know, this is a Chazal, everyone knows the story with the Hillel and the potential convert. So, one of the answers given for this is, what is Torah and what is love? That's the question. What is Torah and what is love? If you knew the answer to that, then you understand the story with Hillel. Hillel is trying to teach us what it is. Torah and love are the same thing. And love and Torah are the same thing. How? You see people have one without the other. So either they don't have Torah or they don't have love. It's like Avos Yisrael and Avos Hashem are the same thing. So how could a person love God and dislike another human being? Something's wrong. They've got the wrong God, or they've got the wrong love. The Yitzchak Barditchever once went to shul on Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah rather, and he stopped and asked a friend, come along, and the friend said to him, Rabbi, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, what's the point, just to pay lip service? And he smiled and said to him, you know the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. So you can have a title, I don't believe in God. Jews don't believe in God. And then, but the subtitle is, the God that is a false God, we don't believe in. So how do we know that the God that we have is the right one? Not a simple question, because most of us, I don't know your backgrounds, but if someone grew up in a traditional home, a frum home, so the God they have is mostly from their parents and education. Not necessarily what they discovered. For good or for bad. If you grew up in a non-frum home, same issue, the same answer. The God you have or don't have is, again, based on your environment, based on your community, family. There are many people I know, personally, that have become Buddhists. I don't know if you know this, but I think 60 or 70% of the Buddhists in this country are Jews. Why did they become Buddhists? Because they're searching for spirituality, and Judaism didn't offer it. And many of them were once from Jews and from homes. Not the largest percentage, but some. And I've met them. And you have to ask yourself the question, so how do you respond to a person like that? It says, my Judaism didn't talk to my soul, and Buddhism did. So the conventional rabbinic answer is, oh, God forbid, how could you do such a thing to the Jewish people and you just ran away? I don't know if an answer like that has ever influenced anybody. They're talking to themselves when they say that. Doesn't answer the question. When young people don't want to go to shul and they go to other spiritual systems, it's easy to blame them. Young people, rebellious, what's going to be with the young generation? But in business, we know the customer is always right. Maybe the product is not being sold right. Nobody wants to look at themselves. No parent wants to look at themselves, and no teacher and rabbi wants to look at him or herself. That's how it is. So Hillel's saying, Torah, love. What is love? Let's go to that. That may be easier, because what is Torah is harder to define. Love. We all think we have some understanding of it. Well, actually, most of us think probably we don't have an understanding. It's quite elusive. But love is a very, like I said, elusive and mysterious commodity. Because no one has ever mastered it. Yet more has been written about it and sung about than anything else. Because we all need it. Well, what is it? So, there are two definitions given for the word love. Two general ones. In the Pirkei Avos it says there's Ava Hatluya B'Dover, Ava She'ena Tluya B'Dover, conditional love, unconditional love. Well, let me use my own way of translating it. Love can be seen as a need. We have many needs. We need to eat, we need to sleep, we need shelter, and we need love. Love, we need nurturing, comfort, companionship, affirmation, everything that love brings, the emotional support that someone cares about you, really cares, is ready to sacrifice for you. So it's a need. It's a sublime need. It's not like a physical, tangible need like a piece of food, but it's another need. Most people would translate it more or less like that if you push them to it. But there's a fundamental thing missing there. The real translation of love in Yiddishkeit, there's Sfarim that talk about this. They say, one sefer says it's called Hagbaras Hatsura ala Chemer. It's the dominance, the predominance of quality over quantity. Or Tsura and Chemer, how could you say? A function over form. in our modern language. It's transcendence. That materialism is immersion, is getting your needs met, and love is the exact opposite of getting your needs met. It's becoming greater than you by reaching to another person, realizing that you can only be greater if you have another person in your life. It's transcendence. Now that's a completely different definition. It doesn't mean that love doesn't satisfy or serve your needs, but it's not driven by your needs. In other words, it doesn't begin and end with your needs. Because anything that begins and ends only with your needs has to be temporary and transient, because needs change. No person's needs are the same when they're 20 than when they're 30. So why not you wake up one morning and say this, your spouse is outgrown your needs. So love based on needs, how could it endure? Needs don't endure. They change. However, a love that's based on transcendence, which means a higher vision, that two people are greater than the sum of their parts, that transcendence endures, even changes. So when Hillel says the Torah is love and love is Torah, he's saying like this: the Torah and love is all about transcendence. Eating kashrus is transcendence. Why do we eat kosher? Why does Hashem command to eat kosher? We know it's not just hygiene or keep Shabbos. 6 days of the week we're immersed in material lives. Our material lives. Comes the seventh day, Hashem says, transcend, rise above, try to avoid being so immersed materially and connect to something beyond. Get out of yourself, basically. What do you think eating kosher is? Making a bracha. Don't just indulge in food. Recognize there's a spiritual event going on. When you sit at a table, you're not just sitting at a table, you're sitting at a mizbeach. Every part of our physical lives has a corresponding mitzvah that's meant to teach us how to transcend that particular part of our material lives. So Hillel is saying that's what a mitzvah is. So many people keep Shabbos, but they don't experience transcendence. They do it by rote, mechanically. How do I know? Because I'm one of them. That's how I know. And I grew up in a home like that. Nice parents. However, you can do things by rote, mechanically. Can most of us say that every Shabbos is a transformative experience? I've literally now a new person. Can we say that even about Yom Kippur? Yeah, the inspiration lasts sometimes for a day or maybe a few hours. But in a deep level like that, and if it doesn't, it also says something. So, Hillel is saying a person who's truly a Torah person, a person who's truly a loving person, they're one and the same. Because when you're sensitive to how you eat a meal, when you're sensitive to how you daven to God, when you're sensitive to everything in the material life, even ben adam l'malkim, between you and God, you'll be more sensitive to human beings. Last week's Pasha we learned that Avram Avinu, God comes to see Hashem, Avram. First time in history, it never happens, you read Vayera, love Hashem. God appears to a person. The first time it says it in the Torah, in an official revelation. You have God spoke to Noach, to Adam, but Vayera, revelation never happens till that point. So it's a pretty unique experience. So what does Avram do? He sees three strangers in the desert, and he turns away from God to greet them. So the Gemara learns from this that that is greater to greet guests than it is to be Mekabel the Shechina, to receive God. We learned that from Avram. The question is, how did Avram know that? If God came to you the first time in history, I don't know, it's like you have a private audience, you suddenly turn away and turn to the strangers. And you see Avram Avinu had discretion, because a little later when Hashem tells him to go sacrifice his son, they're suddenly so obedient. He doesn't turn away from Hashem. Because Avram Avinu knew that sitting and davening with Hashem and ignoring and being insensitive to other human beings is a selfish piety, is what it's called. I don't know if you ever heard the expression, a tzaddik in pelts. Okay. It means a tzaddik in a fur coat. Now when it's cold in the room, you can warm yourself by putting on a fur coat, or you could warm yourself by lighting a fire. That warms not only you, but everyone else. Spiritual arrogance is where spirituality becomes your thing. It's not about God, it's about you. So some people, the you is money, and others it's covet and honor, and others it's spirituality. Godliness is not spirituality. See, godliness is all about bittul, about rising above transcendence, rising above yourself. Spirituality can be all about you. It's not the same thing. It may be a stepping stone, material to spiritual to God, but it's not the same. That's the big distinction. That's why in Judaism, spirituality is a stepping stone that helps a person perhaps reach God, but the main emphasis is on an actual mitzvah. So people say, no, spirituality is better than doing an act. But the key is the fusion of body and soul, of matter and spirit. I say this because it's very painful, really. I was in Israel in the beginning of the summer, in a beautiful country. You've all been there, I'm sure, many of you. But then you see the contrast of people and the hatred that exists between the ultra-right-wing Haredim, as they call it, and the ultra-left-wing liberal. Chilonim, secular. And that same polarization is here too, but it's not so pronounced. And I have a friend there, he's a real Haredi, a real frum guy. And I said to him, if every frum Jew in Israel would invite one non-frum Jew to their Shabbos table, I think the whole landscape of the country would change. He started laughing. I said, would you do that? He says, never. It hurt me so because I said to myself, even a simple thing like that, like, why not? 50 years ago, you'd be lying next to him, God forbid, in the concentration camps. On Shabbos table, we can't sit near each other. But there's so much distrust and so much towards stereotyping. And I experience this constantly. Go around, have a beer, a yarmulke, I speak, as I said, bookstores, and people, they have, before you even open your mouth, there's already the stereotype. And stereotype is very invisible. It creates a deep distrust that's very hard to crack. Very hard. Because everything is like, we're all part of like a country club thing. Going to shuls, every shul has its personality, you fit in, you don't fit in, It's sad to see because a house of God should be accepting of everyone. Now, of course, the Torah has standards, but unfortunately, I think it's more about our own insecurities than about the Torah's standards. We need to hold on to our way of seeing things. And if I could say anything, I say it to myself as much as to you, this is the poison of our times and the challenge of our times. The fact is, you don't like to be stereotyped. So why is it that we do it to others? Because, I don't know, we can analyze it psychologically, that is due, as I said, due to insecurity, our own fears, so we like to categorize things, we like to file people away. Oh, this one belongs in this file, on this shelf. But the truth is, it's a poison, especially when it comes to Yiddishkeit. If you do it in business, or you do it in a material part of our lives, okay, that's part of the way of all flesh, the ways of the world. But it's antithetical to everything that is being Jewish, and that's what Hillel said, that the entire Torah and transcendence are one. And a person who really does a mitzvah becomes a more sensitive human being overall. Even when they're davening and there's no one around, that person has become more sensitive, and they will treat another human being with more sensitivity. Unfortunately, if Torah, mitzvah, does not bring more love, there's something fundamentally missing. It may still be worthwhile to do it because mitzvah gereres mitzvah, one mitzvah brings another, but what's missing is the whole point. Whole point. Now, I remember I was, I think this was, where was it, in Alaska. I was in Anchorage, Alaska. And I spoke there at a bookstore. And there was someone came over for me to sign the book, and he was a priest. And he tells me he's the assistant archdiocese to the Catholic Church in all of Alaska. If you don't know what that is, it's fine too. And he says to me he's here because he's exploring his roots. His roots are that his mother's mother is Jewish. Right? Okay, so what do you tell a guy like this? Mother's mother's Jewish. So what am I supposed to do? Lay a heavy trip on him that he's Jewish, he should come from the church, and come back with me to New York, to whatever. I don't think it would fly. So I said to him, I asked him his maiden name, his mother's maiden name. He told me Yaakov. She grew up in Germany, and then Yakli became Yaakov. So I took his name, and I decided, I'll introduce him to some rabbi there maybe, and we'll start to get the ball rolling. I didn't even know what to do. First of all, I was amazed. You think these stories about Shem Tov times, you see it. Anyway, came back to New York. I had his address. I sent him a note, a letter. And he didn't respond right away. Around a month later, he wrote to me that he read my book. And something was drawing him to it. And the interesting thing is that he wrote to me some language that's Christian and Catholic. He says, so though I'm a Catholic, but I have to say these are the words of God. And he was not, he was an intelligent person. Anyway, to make a long story short, recently he came to New York. For some reason he called me. He left the church. And I didn't want to ask him why, because it's not like we have a very personal relationship. But he left the church. And he said to me he wants to go to a synagogue in Yom Kippur somewhere. So I suggested something in New York, where he went. And after Yom Kippur he called me. He wants to talk some more. The story is still evolving. It's not over yet. But I had unbelievable emotional reaction and experience sitting with him, because he opened up his life a little. And I couldn't believe that, in this day and age, that I had the schus to be able to meet a Jew like that, the church. And I don't know if it was my own, I don't think it was only myself, probably many factors that are bearing on him. I say this like this: if we go away from this evening, as I said in the beginning, every one of us sitting here has a responsibility. Can't be a tzaddik impulse. We have to go away from here knowing that for every person in this room, there are 1,000 Jews that won't come into a room like this. Not because they don't like or Kitov or Rabbi Dinnerstein or all of us here, but they have stereotypes. They don't trust. And you have to respect why they don't trust. To blame them is ridiculous. They don't trust for good reasons. Everyone has their own story. And trust me, I'm sure everyone in this room has their own story also. But we learn to compromise. Like someone says to me, adulthood is about resignation. You learn that it's not perfect, you just got to compromise. As Jews, we don't have to compromise, because there is more to reach. It's the people in our lives and the establishment that have so beat out so much of the spirit. And I say this, that we have power and we can empower each other. Sometimes you want to get that power, you have to warm other people. You warm others, you get warmer yourself. So let me conclude with a bracha, first of all, to all the hosts of these gatherings, this gathering and other gatherings like this. The goal of, I assume, of Malav Malka is not just to have a nice party, but to go away and it should do something that really changes us. But it's hard to maintain that inspiration. The way to do it is, you take a resolution, you have to bring it down with another person. And find someone that needs a little inspiration. And you'll see, by inspiring them, you get more inspired. It's just simple. That's the simple formula. You can't be lazy, you got to do it. But when you do it, you'll see what it gives you in return. So everyone have a great vach, and may we only see each other at happy occasions. And Yankel, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to listen. And everyone have a great vach.
So I want to thank my friend, Reb Shimon. I'll tell you, folks, my tongue, don't go away. My tongue all week long is wondering what's going on. It's Shimon and Shimon and Shimon and Shimon, and Shimon is speaking and Shimon is playing, and they don't know what's going on. So it's such a great pleasure to have Reb Shimon Jacobsen with us. I want to give him a special gift, something to remember us by. The Rebbe has had such a wonderful effect on my life, on Reb Shlomo's life, and on Reb Simon's life, and I want him to take this away, and wherever he'll put it, I hope he'll think kindly about the Carlebach Hasidim of Brooklyn. Thank you so much for coming. But listen, I can't let you get away without asking you to say just a word or two about your wonderful radio program, and tell people when they can hear you.
Sunday, first of all, anyone ever comes to the city on Wednesday night, I have a class Wednesday night, the Upper West Side, at 89th and Riverside Drive. 89. I think so, yeah, 89. And I welcome everyone there. It's a very interesting interaction between two worlds, I can describe. 8 p.m. every Wednesday night.
Thank you so much.
It's on the corner of Riverside and 89. I'm not sure the number.
The Rice Mansion?
Not in the Jewish day school there. Shiv Tana. You can't miss it, right? And every Sunday I speak on the radio, 6 to 7 on WVD, 10:50 a.m. Call-ins, so you're all invited to call. Pretty interesting show for me. What's tomorrow's topic? Tomorrow's topic is regaining lost faith.
What's the name of your book?
Towards a Meaningful Life.
What?
Let's have one more big round of applause for our friend Rabbi Shimon Jacobsen.
What do you got? Want me to hold it? Yes. Shimon. Yeah. I need to get it. Come on. Yeah, everything's ready.
One, two, one, two, one, two. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Everybody can hear me, yeah? I'd like to, first of all, before I start, to thank in advance these wonderful musicians that have come here tonight, this evening, to play for us. Okay, Ben Levin on the guitar, famous Hasidic folk singer, Zweig. To have him play with me tonight. Okay, on the bass, I really appreciate Rabbi Zalman. On the organ, on the keyboard, Mickey. Siga, everybody knows, on the tambourine. And last but not least, Joey Fisher. Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hanavi, Kimheira, Kimheira, Moyeleinu, Imoshia ben David, Bimera, Moyeleinu, Imoshia ben David, Bimera, Moyeleinu, Imoshia ben David. Hashem said to Abraham that he blessed Abraham, and he promised him that he shall multiply his seed like the stars in heaven and the sand near the sea. So open my heart, let me open my heart to you, my friends, and you shall open your hearts with me to what I want to say to you. Above the zodiac, Hashem reigns alone. He thinks about his kinderlach. It's time to bring them home. Is it too difficult for you? Okay, let's do it over here.
Not at all. You think he was right.
A little technical improvement here.
Okay. That's better? Yeah. Okay. High above the zodiac, Hashem reigns alone. He thinks about his kinderlach. It's time to bring them home to Eretz Yisrael. He will bring David HaMelech. He will sing, and we will sing to him a Shir Chadash U'Emon Aleh. believe it, but I just made up a song. Okay, I want to sing for you this evening, some songs I never sang maybe for a long, long time. I feel that I owe this to you because, as we see, the crowd is not so great tonight, but still those who are here are very dear to me. So it's not really the quantity, but it's the quality.
The crowd is great. It's not so far.
All right. You're right. Second one, right?
I'm getting a buzz. I wish I was getting a buzz.
What you really need is a new capo. That's fine, don't worry. Okay. After guy came to Olam Haba, a Kohen, so-called guy who proclaimed to be a Kohen. So he comes up to the next world to come, and they say, well, you know, he sees suddenly two angels, and each angel had this whip in their hands, you know, and said, you know, you weren't really a Kohen because we know that you were a Israel, but you all the time were saying that you're a Kohen, and therefore every time when you were called up to the Torah, you were called up as a Kohen, and therefore it's a terrible sin. So therefore we have to purify you. So they started, you know, beating him with the whip and so forth. Okay, fine. So when they finished the work, you know, suddenly he says, okay, go now forward. So he thought he's going straight into the Gan Eden. Suddenly he sees another two malachim, two angels. He says, also with whips. So what is this for? He says, this is for Bimkom Kohen. Okay. I like to sing a song for those who are lying in the hospitals, unfortunately, and for their fully recovery. Every person, you know, somehow in this world is suffering from something. Unfortunately, you know, I travel around here and there, hospitals, and even those who are not in the hospitals sometimes say, you know, es tut mir weh here, es tut mir weh there, you know. So everybody needs a refuah shalema. I composed a song. This was Rabbi.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Take a break.
I'm going to take a break. Okay, I'll talk. I'll speak a little bit. Anyway, I composed a song purely because